Hello everybody and welcome back to another new vlog. Thank you for joining me once again. I've made an interesting discovery through many hours of looking at YouTube videos, which I suggest you guys do as well, by the way. And it's all to do with the Humble light meter. But before I do, let me just explain to you, I've already had 2 sightings today. Well, this will be my 3rd sighting today of Exmoor ponies here in this park. I've taken a photo of one and a little bit of video footage of another, but just behind me, just a few yards up this path, there are a couple more. So I'm going to head off and start looking for interesting compositions, and then I'll talk to you more about the light meter in just a moment. So, do we need to use a light meter in landscape photography? Well, the easy answer to that is not necessarily, but I think we probably should be using light meters in landscape photography because there may be a possibility that it can improve our photography very slightly. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's a light meter built in to most digital cameras anyway now, and you'd be right about that, but that doesn't necessarily do the same job as a dedicated external light meter. So I'll find my first composition and then I'll try and explain to you why. These 2 trees behind me that you can see now might be a good example of how to demonstrate the difference between the in-camera light meter and a dedicated external light meter. First of all, we need to understand the difference between them, and the difference is that the light meter built into your camera will meter the light based on reflected light. So any light that's hitting that tree will bounce off that tree and be reflected back towards your camera. Now, that means that the meter meters for the brightest light in that particular subject. But your dedicated external light meter will work slightly differently because that takes an incident reading rather than a reflected light reading, which means that instead what it will do, it will measure exactly what the light looks like rather than the reflected light that's bouncing back off the tree. I'm going to take 2 images here of these trees, and the first one I'm going to photograph using the in-camera light meter, and the second one I'll photograph using the dedicated external light meter and show you the difference. I'm going to put those images on the screen now for you, and just explain exactly what I did. The first image on the left of your picture, that was shot using aperture priority in the camera, and the reason I did that was I wanted to choose the aperture and the ISO and allow the camera itself to decide exactly what shutter speed I should have. In this case, the first image was shot with a shutter speed of 1/200th of a second. Like I said, ISO 200, f4. So I switched my camera into manual mode then for the second image, and with the second image I set the ISO to 200 again, and I set my aperture to f4 again, and then I physically walked up to the trees themselves with my light meter, and I'll show you that in just a minute, and took a meter reading from the brightest part of those trees, and that gave me an exposure time, a shutter speed of 1/2000th of a second rather than 1/200th. And the reason for that disparity is, in the first image the camera was trying to meter for the reflected light, which is obviously very slightly brighter than the actual instance light. So the second image looks as though it's a lot darker, but you'll notice in the first image the highlights look almost blown out, and the rest of the image is almost blown out as well. But in the second image the highlights are just about right. It may be that some of the background looks a little bit dark. That's only because of the huge amount of contrast between the dark and light at the moment. So from those images you can tell that using a light meter makes quite a big difference to taking your landscape photos. I'm going to move on and see if I can find another composition now, preferably within the woodland in a darker area, and maybe I can highlight that a little bit better for you. This is quite interesting here. While I'm stood here about to set up and do some more footage and take another photo for you, two ladies came past and asked me if I'd seen any of the Exmoor ponies today. Yes, I have, thanks. Go back the way you've just come. While I'm here, I'm about to take a photo of this tree, but before I do, I just want to show you something. I was here a few weeks ago and I took a photo of that tree there, and I crossed the path and took a photo of that tree there as well. Literally just 5 yards or so away from where I'm about to take the next photo. But I'm going to take this photo anyway, and I'll show you my light meter as well. So this is my light meter. It's just a standard Sekonic light meter. It's just an instant light meter, and it will literally just meter the light in any particular spot. I'm not sponsored by Sekonic, who made this particular one, but it's something that I've had in my kit for about 6 or 7 years, to be quite honest with you. So it's something I have used in the past, although not very often in the woodland, and certainly not very often in landscape photography either. So I'm going to set up and take this photo now using the light meter. Well, that was really interesting. I'll show you both images on screen again in just a moment, so I want you to really pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. Basically, when I let the camera choose the exposure time, it gave me a shutter speed of 1/60th of a second, ISO 200 and aperture f4. The second one, aperture f4, ISO 200, with the light meter, also gave me a 1/60th of a second exposure time. Now let me try and explain the reason for that. Basically, with the first shot I took of the trees up in the park that were very bright, first of all they were lighter trees anyway, and they were in a much lighter area, so there was quite a lot of lighter reflected light from those trees. But in the woodland here there's virtually no reflected light at all, and that tree was a much darker subject, so you get little or no reflective light off the tree itself, but also little or no reflected light because you're in a much darker area. So that was quite an interesting one. Hope you like those two images as well. You can tell that the exposure looks very slightly different in the two images. That's not because they're different exposures, they are the same, but it's because the light in the woodland is constantly changing, and in between me taking the first shot and the second shot, although they meted exactly the same exposure, the exposure was slightly different by the time I took the second one. I decided to make my way over to Bracebridge Pool to take a photo here. The reason for that was I don't really have a subject to focus on. It's more of a scene that I wanted to focus on, and obviously to do that, it's rather than metering for the subject itself, because I don't have a subject, I'm metering for the ambient light, which makes a big difference on a scene like this. So again, I've set up the camera, switched it to aperture priority, changed my aperture to f16, ISO 100 this time, and let the camera decide what the shutter speed should be, and in this case it was 1/40th of a second, and I quite like that image. But the second image, what I did was switch my camera back to manual mode, switch my aperture to f16 and my ISO to 100 again, and then simply stood out by the lake, out by the pool, and metered the ambient light, and this time what I got was a reading of 1/8 of a second. So I set my camera to 1/8 of a second and took the photo, and that appears to be slightly overexposed as far as I'm concerned. Certainly the highlight areas in the foreground seem overexposed. The sky looks alright, but I think that's because it's metering for the ambient light rather than a subject light. So that was quite an interesting one. I hope you like those images as well. I think I may go and take one more image somewhere. I'm going to head back exactly the way I came and take one more image somewhere, because the light has changed a lot since I set out and started my vlog today. So let's see if I can find something different on the way back. Guys, explain something to me. Don't you just hate lying bastards? I was over by Bracebridge Pool just then. I didn't want to say anything at the time because the geezer I'm about to talk about was hanging around somewhere. I didn't know exactly where he was. But this guy came up to me and said hello, and he started chatting to me. He seemed friendly enough. He asked me what camera I was using, and I told him the EOS RP. And he'd got a Canon camera, looked fairly new. And he said to me, "Oh, this is the RS, this is." I thought, that's a bit strange. There's no such thing as an RS. There's never been any such thing as an RS. It's never been rumoured. Canon aren't bringing out an RS. He said, "Oh yeah, it's not even properly out yet. I'm just testing it." And I thought, it's all bollocks, that is. Anyway, I knew it was all rubbish because he was wearing his camera with a camera strap around his neck. I could see the letters RP on the camera strap and also on the camera. So I know for a fact he hadn't got an RS. He was chatting absolute shit, mate. But I hate it when people have to be one better than everybody else. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing at all wrong with saying, "Yeah, I've got an EOS RP, mate. Don't worry about that." If you're any good at photography, it doesn't really matter which camera you've got. I've said this before. If you're any good at photography, you'll be able to capture images with a shoebox with a hole in it, mate. Anyway, that's my little bit of a rant. I'm still on the path that I've previously walked down today, heading back to where I started. So maybe I'll find a little composition on the way back. Hope so. These trees behind me are the two that I photographed at the very beginning of my vlog. So I'm back to where I started now. I'm going to keep walking because there's still a little bit of a walk for me to get back to where I need to be, where I actually entered the park. And it's through quite a dark woodland, much darker than the one I've just walked through. So I'm going to have a look and see if there's any decent images there. I think trying out the light meter in that kind of space may be an interesting scenario as well. Don't know how well it'll work, what difference it will make, but it's got to be worth a try. In the meantime, I did just take another image, handheld. Didn't bother metering it in any way, just handheld manual mode and just eyeballed the correct exposure on the back of the live view screen, just because there was a great big piece of fungus on the side of the path. And going back to something I was talking about in my previous vlog, I wanted to capture that because it was a case of looking at the floor to see it. So I'm heading back through this woodland now, and I'll see if I can find something else. I haven't even quite got back into that darker bit of woodland that I'm heading for, and I've just come about 150 yards up the path, maybe 200 yards. There's this tree here, which is a very dark tree, but I've already walked past another tree down here, which is a much lighter tree. So I'm wondering whether I should take a photo of each of those, one with the light meter and one with the in-camera light meter. I think it's got to be done, really, hasn't it? So I'll set up here and take these two shots, and then I'm going to make a move, I think. There you go then, folks, two more images, both with side-by-side comparisons, one with the camera light meter working, and one with the external light meter metering for the image. Very interesting. The first of those two images, there wasn't very much difference between the two exposures once I got down to it. I think there was only one stop of difference between the two. But with the second image, there were 4 stops of exposure difference. The first one, the camera, because it was quite a light tree, the camera tried to underexpose it, but then obviously when the light meter, the external light meter was used, that tried to expose for the light that was around the tree, basically the instance light. So what that meant was there were 4 stops of dynamic range between the two. Now, having considered that, what I might try and do is see if 1 or 2 of these images could be bracketed, where I use both exposures, one where the camera has taken the exposure and one where the light meter has determined the exposure. Perhaps I could bracket a couple of those images. I don't know for sure yet whether I want to do that, because I think that the images with the light meter in most cases tend to be the better exposed images anyway. I'm going to leave it here for today. I hope you've enjoyed this vlog. I hope you like the images, and if you do, please remember to give the video a thumbs up, and also remember to subscribe to my channel, and if you can, please remember to share the video on your social media platforms, and also if you've got time, leave me a comment in the comments box below. You don't have to, and I will try and answer all of your comments that I get. In the meantime guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another vlog very soon. Bye for now.